And with that, I have the pleasure of welcoming to the stage Glenn Mercer, who, other than a great thought leader within the industry, a good thought partner of mine, also is actually an investor in our funds.
So much for the intellectual apex of that.
Okay.
Well, we all make mistakes here and there. Thank you very much. I won't shake your hand because I've got a cold. Right. Thank you very much, Steve, and anyone who doesn't subscribe to his weekly newsletter is missing out, because it's a great summary of what's been happening and what's going to happen as well. Thank you very much for having me here to speak. We need to reset the clock here, because otherwise I will fill all possible airtime. By the way, the title in the brochure is a little off. It's not 10 things you might not have known. I would not come to an audience with as much depth here and presume to tell you things you did not know about the auto industry. It's more about 10 questions I have about the automotive industry. The only thing I for sure bring to this podium is my age. And my first automotive piece of work was in 1985 with McKinsey. Yes, I was at McKinsey for 20 years, but I'm neither under a house arrest or indicted. It was for United Auto Group, the predecessor to Penske. So I've been around a long time, and there's been a few things that just sort of keep coming back over and over and over again, and I'm going to lay out those questions here. For each of these questions, I have my own hypotheses as to answers, but I really want to tee them up as open-ended questions. Steve did ask if I was going to talk about agency. I won't be. We did recently at NADA complete a very large project on, among other things, agency, and I hope the results will eventually be out in the public domain soon, but the legal wheels turn slowly at NADA as they are reviewing it to make sure it's ready to be trotted out, and we'll see when that happens. But I will say, if I had to boil everything down I've ever heard about any sales channel, whether it's either Daewoo having college students sell Daewoos to other college students, there is no financial risk there at all, to direct-to-consumer without stores, to agency, to quasi-agency, to the famous European term of non-genuine agency, on and on and on, all these different things. It all comes down, in my view, to two equations. If demand is greater than supply, you can sell any way you want. You can drop cars from blimps, you can auction them off, you can raffle them, you could have people mud wrestling for the chance at the next Lamborghini special edition. It doesn't matter, do what you want. But if supply is greater than demand, and every car plant, including the one up the road here a bit in Fremont, running on its 60-second takt time and very high fixed cost basis, we'll keep churning out cars the way, to show you my age, Lucille Ball tried to keep up with the chocolates on the assembly line. And you build inventory, supply is greater than demand, and you need someone or something to hold local stocks and make the problem go away. And so though no dealer will ever say this in public, I don't think, and no OEM will certainly ever say it in public. A function of the dealership network is to solve problems and put butts in seats of cars that otherwise shouldn't have been made for one reason or another, not because somebody's evil, but just a mistake was made in overproduction or the wrong kind of model. That's all I'll say about agency. Okay, I didn't see the speaker list for today until my presentation was locked down. But oddly enough, I see that many of the speakers later on today will touch on some of these 10 questions. So I'm feeling pretty good about this, in that this actually tees a few things up. And yes, copies of this, like copies of Steve's, will be available. And you can also go to my Substack, where I rant and rave on automotive topics. It's worth every penny the subscription costs. Okay. What happened to the future? We know this is relentlessly repeated. We wanted flying cars. Instead, we got 140 characters, et cetera. And so based on my experience in the auto retailing industry since the 1980s, I have my own What Happened to the Future manifesto expressed as 10 questions. Again, I'm not predetermining the answers. A lot of stuff has dramatically changed, but a few things just keep nagging at me. I apologize in advance. A lot of these questions have been answered somewhere, somehow. As William Gibson said, the future is already here, it's just not widely distributed yet. And so somebody's already figured out an answer to all 10 of these questions. But I'm talking about across the general landscape of the 330 million Americans, the 18,000 new car dealerships and the Tesla stores and Rivians, et cetera, and the 285 million cars on the road, et cetera. At that broad level, this is where these questions come in. Okay. First, I have a bias alert because I quoted Where Are the Flying Cars? I used to be on the board of directors of Aeromobil in Slovakia, which makes a true flying car. You can drive it somewhere, pop the wings out, and then fly. Sorry, Charlie Vogelheim, eVTOLs are not flying cars. So I'm just getting my bias out of the way. They just fly, they don't drive. Okay, question one. Where is the growth in dealer sales force productivity? Every year, for at least a quarter of a century, I count up all the new car dealership, new car salespeople, not the used car salespeople, and their managers and things from the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, level, and then also coordinated and triangulated with NADA. There has been no gain in new cars sold per salesperson per month in decades. It's flat, right around 9 or 10. Now, I know your store is different, and your salespeople are at 15, or you've got a killer BDC and you're at 25. When I count up all the new cars sold and I divide it by the number of salespeople, it's 10 cars per head per month. This goes way back. Here's a pin that Chevrolet handed out for people entering the 100 car club, the first shrill initiation, 100 cars per year. That was in the 1930s. Over a century of essentially flat salesperson productivity. Lots of reasons why, I won't go into those, we'll just kind of lay that out as a question. By the way, average annual change in output per head for other sales industries of sales forces are more like 6, 4, and 4%. If you're interested, the only industry that matches automotive new car sales, I'm being very precise here, automotive new car sales is, and on dollar terms, of course, it's gone up, but in units, flat, is wait staff at restaurants, full-service restaurants. Because we haven't yet, despite people on roller skates with trays, we really haven't automated that very labor-intensive process, unless you go to fast food, and that's an entirely different thing. So where is the growth in dealer sales force productivity, especially given how much technology has been thrown at arming, upgrading, and informing, and training, and retraining the sales force? Why does this stay flat? Number two, where are the efficiencies in dealer-level ad spend? I don't mean the Super Bowl ads that the OEM does. Advertising spend per new vehicle retailed, dollars per new vehicle retailed 2023 to 2023, sorry. You can see it's gone up, despite countless improvements in tracking ad effectiveness, despite the transition from analog to digital, which is going to just bring down ad spend like crazy. Why are we still here? And if we look at the year 2000, the number is $375. If we adjust it for inflation, it's $680. It's like the Salesforce line. It is completely flat. What is going on? Why are we still spending this much money? Why did we spend exactly the same amount of money during the pandemic, when customers would come to the dealership before it opened and said, I've got a bag of cash, do you have anything with wheels? I'm being, humorous, or trying to be humorous, sarcastic anyway. But another question, given how much money has been poured into ad tech, why is this still here? Maybe this is just the right number. Doesn't matter how effective it is or not, $650 sounds about right. Number three, and this one was something, of course, that Steve alluded to. Why has new car inventory remained stubbornly high? I'm not talking about this year it's up and last year it was down and next year it'll be this way or that way. I'm going back to more of the looking at the future. Car factories are getting more and more flexible. It was no longer a matter of, let's make 1.4 million Chevrolets of one model, which we did in some years in the 1950s. 1.4 million of basically one model. Factories are more flexible. Remember, we used to have to outsource convertibles because we couldn't figure out how to make them. So Carmen would make, Golf convertible, cabriolets, excuse me. AFC would make things like that. We figured out how to make convertibles. We mix and match Civics and Accords and Odysseys in the same line. We should be able to build vehicles to order. The fixed costs of production were falling slightly. That's gone the other way now. Customers wanted more customization. Remember the mantra, market size of one. Make it just for me. Give me the Air Jordans specifically tailored to what I want. And so what happened? So I'm just looking back, and everybody counts inventory a different way. So I've never been able to get a steady data series that I like that goes all the way back. So it went up and it goes down. This is the pandemic peak, of course, before sales started going back up again. But, it's still sort of, kind of, roughly 60 days over time. And to show a partial answer to this pretty infamous J.D. Power chart, I'm not quite sure how they draw their regression ovals here, but piling them high still pays off up to a point. To quote J.D. Power, on the relationship between days of supply and retail market share, the relationship was relatively strong between 0 and 40 days of supply, but it broke down beyond 40 days. So it wasn't that if you just had more and more and more inventory until it could be seen from space or whatever, you would sell more cars. It was up to about 40 days worth, it would get you more retail market share locally, and then it became just a boat anchor after that. And maybe for this store it's 30 and that store it's 70, but you get the point. And it is pretty odd because if you approach it as a Martian coming back from, maybe an Elon Musk mission to Mars, you come as a Martian looking at the country, you'd say, what's the most expensive thing anybody ever buys other than their house? And you'd say, it's a car. Well, how do you sell those? Well, we make them and then we park them outside for a month or two. We want all the door seals to really weld together and the battery to go flat, and maybe the tires to flat spot, because that's really what matures them like fine wine on the lot. So why do we do this? Why did build to order not so far work? Okay, maybe it will work, I don't know. Next, why have dealers not been able to make satellite and mobile service work? Teeing one up for somebody speaking later on today. The service market is $350 billion, parts and labor combined. Dealers have 30% of this. In the 1960s, dealers had 45%. A long, slow, steady decline, even though every year we repeat to ourselves, the car is so complex now that the aftermarket can't possibly handle it. That may be true at some point, and maybe with ADAS we're getting to that final inflection point. And Lord knows DIY has pretty much gone away. DIY at this point in time is changing the pine tree air freshener. But it hasn't been positive, the trend. I think a lot of it is convenience. We have 18,000 dealer, I almost said laptops, rooftops, versus about 250,000 independent aftermarket sites, and they're hard to count. So more than 10 times as many, and we know convenience is key to service retention behind only price, and in some surveys, moving ahead of price. So where is dealer-based satellite and mobile service? This is a famous Cox chart showing the return to dealer for service in the past 12 months based on distance from dealers. We can't just keep building yet more service bays at one mothership. How do we get mobile and remote service to work? And I know there's lots of reasons why it hasn't worked so far. So again, if this was easy, we'd do it, right? Okay. However, we have done it in the past. I like this. This is the Cadillac, Cadillac residential service, where this spiffily attired driver from the local dealership, I'm not sure this look would fly today, but I can imagine telling the technician, you're going to have to wear white gloves. Anyway, it would drive the Harley out to your home, hitch up your wounded car to it, and drag it back to the dealership. So there have been attempts at this on and on over the years. No, if this one will come back. Number 5, this is brilliant work done by, by me. This is an NADA study. It's still available on the website. But why do OEMs still insist on standardized dealership facilities, standardized looks, image programs? I don't mean nice facilities. We need indoor plumbing, and you don't want plywood in the windows and stuff like that. We did lots and lots of work looking at We asked 14 OEMs for their numbers on the ROI of their image programs. This is admittedly a while back. One had numbers, and you can guess which one that is. Big Japanese company, leader in hybrids. Okay. But they just say, oh, the customer loves it. Well, of course the customer would like a newer store and a nicer store than an older, dilapidated store. The question is, does it pay off in average retail price or in sales volume? So we realize there's actually layers of facility programs. There's the expansion, like you got a lot more UIO, you better have more service bays. There's modernization, as in, sorry, the Sanka pot, which has been boiling since last week, is not enough. You're going to need an espresso machine. And then the standardization part. And we found, no surprise to you in the audience, that expansion pays off. If you could fill a service bay, you will pay it off. Modernization pays off in that, or at least as neutral as in table stakes. You have to have a nice store. But the standardization part, they should look all the same. And I actually heard, it was in my presence, I heard person say this. It was Ford, but it was an unnamed person, said, we want the Ford dealership experience to be the same, whether it's in Moscow, Bangkok, or Montana. And I said, why? Who is cross-shopping, at this level? Is there someone driving down the road in America who said, oh yeah, I remember one of the things I forgot before we left on our trip to Wally World, we have to buy a car. Could people keep an eye out and see if they can see a Ford store? They look like this, right? So it's truly amazing to think about it. And so there's a dead weight loss to the dealership's bottom line with standardization. And the one, they listened, we went back and reported the results, and actually some of them moved a little bit on their requirements as a result. But one thing that was, all the charts and graphs and data were important, but the one thing that finally got some people to shut up was this picture of Apple stores. Because at that time, that was the retailer of the year. Each year, OEMs kind of worship a different retailer. Remember when it was Dell, you're gonna do build to order, and Apple, et cetera, or Tesla for a while, et cetera. These are Apple stores around the world. They all have the logo. All the stores look completely different. And there's no customer who walks by and goes, wonder what that is? That's probably produce in there. So making that point. Why do we still insist on standardized? I don't mean modernized, but standardized. Okay, this one really is this is throwing a softball up to the next session, which I did not know when I wrote this. Will dealers ever have more choice in choosing a DMS provider? Here, this is outside my swim lane. I have a computer, but that's where my IT skills end. So this is from the famous Stefan Drexel. The annual spend on dealership software in the United States is around $7 billion. I don't know if that's right or not. That's what I hear from someone who I think would know. The largest single piece of this is the DMS, over $6,000 per month per site. That may be wrong, but that's what I'm told by a reliable source. And this spend is forecast to grow at a steady rate. There are over 800 vendors in the overall dealership software category. Steve's periodic charts on the vendors give a really good overview of everybody out there. And there are other sources as well. And indeed, I like to joke that the only thing that outnumbers the number of dealers at an NADA convention is the CRM providers on the exhibit floor. But about 80%, depending how you cut it, of the market is captured by just 3 providers. And despite years of waiting, only one significant new entrant. I've talked to, over the years, especially when I was at McKinsey, SAS, Microsoft, various companies all saying, this is a market, we should be able to knock this one off and get in. But the quasi, and I'm using the word oligopoly, you can't use it probably because of legal words, restrictions, but I'm just gonna throw it out there as an opinion. I'll be interested in hearing from Techion, why is this so hard? But then again, we see how well software upgrades at hospitals has worked too. So maybe it's just, IT is just much harder than we all thought. Number 7, will dealers ever be able to sell insurance? This is just out of my own left field brain. I don't mean gap insurance or extended warranties, other I products in F&I, but just regular old insurance because you all need it. And Steve, of course, showed the chart showing that this is now The chart doesn't show this, but you can read into it and you can calculate from it that for the average new car sold, insurance is probably going to be the biggest expense in the first year, not fuel, depending on whether you've got a guzzler or not, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an immense amount of money. Why do dealers, generally speaking, not sell it? They're inextricably linked, typically by law. For a new car, insurance premiums may exceed fuel costs. Progress in tech allows for easy enrollment and lots of usage-based pricing. I worked for Progressive Insurance in 1999 on their first usage-based insurance product called Autograph, which is a little box. They had to drill holes under the dashboard to install it and to track cars for adjusting premiums for usage. You'll be glad to know that the one thing that America's leadership in has never been challenged, never will be challenged, and that is we can sue anyone, anytime. In the first 2 months, we were subpoenaed by a lawyer of an angry spouse trying to find out exactly where her husband had been going on those late night weekend trips and wanted to use our tracking software to find out. Tesla and other OEMs have various degrees been experimenting with it. Commissions can be 5 to 15% of the first year's premium at sale and on renewal, but dealers mostly do not participate. Lots of good reasons for why they don't. I understand this one may be a bridge way too far. Risk, the last thing you want to do as you're trying to close a deal is say, oh, by the way, when you drive out of here, your premiums are going to go way up. A regulatory and cost burden of having a licensed agent on site. The complexity and time added to the car sale. As we know, customers just want to get out the door. We don't want to hear about other stuff, and it's not core to the business, et cetera. But it has always been interesting to me from day one as why this gigantic industry, which exists over here only to insure these products, and these products act as if those products don't exist, broadly speaking. I mentioned Poly. I'm not calling them out in particular, but there are attempts to get into this and see if they can get it to work. Okay. Excuse me. Question 8, will dealers be able to increase their share of the accessories market? Again, great. Thank you, Steve, for showing the 8 cylinders of the V8, all receiving fuel at different rates. I think engineering-wise, it's probably not a good idea, but I think Cadillac had a version of that at one point. But anyway, nobody got that. Okay, all right. Inadvertent variable compression rates. Okay, but one of the shops in the dealership is the accessory or special equipment market, which is about $50 billion according to SEMA. Suspension parts, light bars, bed liners, sound systems, towing kits, body panels, etc. About 90% of all these accessories are bought within 90 days of a vehicle purchase. So dealers have the frustrating sight of seeing someone buying the Silverado and then driving down 3 blocks to Eddie's specialty wheel shop and swapping all the wheels out. So dealers sell 95% of new retail cars, but have only a 12% share of this market, and that's a generous estimate according to SEMA. I've seen it as low as 6%, but call it 10%. Are there inextricable, unscalable barriers as to why dealers cannot get more of this market? I know there have been lots of attempts at it from the OEMs and from dealers. And you've got like a Galpin or somebody who's figured it out, obviously. There are incredible outliers out there. But again, is this something where the customer doesn't want to hear about that right now? I want to get the car bought and let me go. I don't need a roof rack. Or is it, I don't want to risk the deal going through by trying to sell something for another $2,000, et cetera. But it's a big market. Number 9, when will F&I peak? Maybe now. I bring this one up because it's important if you're talking about the future to admit your mistakes in the past. And those who've heard me speak in the past know that one of my biggest absolute total flops is I thought F&I might peak at, I don't know, $800 per car. Okay, and every year wrong, and then you figure, well, maybe after a decade or so of being wrong, I would learn. So I joke now that F&I per car in 2030 will be $250,000, just giving myself headroom. And maybe it already has peaked, and of course with the FTC on the rampage right now, though in a really bizarre way, I don't know the legalities of the regulations, but their database and their arguments, their fact base for the argument for this is not strong, but we'll see how it all thrashes out. So maybe we already are seeing a bit of a peak here. But question is there more to do in I? It's hard to imagine even more proliferation of insurance products. I mean, we can insure anything now. It's probably even asteroid strikes, whatever, lost keys, tire and wheel, et cetera, et cetera. So the innovation rate has been great. The innovation in the process has been great. This is probably one of the questions where the industry actually has responded and answered Mercer's question. Menu selling, the professionalization of the F&I office is no longer where, Dwayne wasn't selling cars very well, so put him in the cubicle and, have him harangue customers for a while. Checklist selling, getting the basics right, et cetera, et cetera. Is anyone named Dwayne here? Sorry, I apologize. I respect your choice of career. So, and so really transformed it. And actually, whenever I talk to European dealers, this is the one that most opens their eyes. They just are staggered by how much of this stuff we can get across the line. And maybe there is still more upside in that the more complicated cars get, the more of an urge there is to protect them. Maybe I need a battery warranty, even if the laws in California say I'm covered, et cetera, maybe I still want one. So it'd be interesting to see if anyone here has a view that right now we're sort of plateauing. Will this kick back up again? And last one, because it's a financial-oriented conference about the future, consolidation is always a hot topic. I always have to ask, when you say consolidation, what do you mean? Numbers of stores or numbers of owners? Two different things. Store consolidation is absolutely non-existent. Rooftop count fell from over 40,000 to 20,000 prior to the Great Recession as the country became more suburban in concentration of population, and a lot of very small rural stores went away. And then, of course, after the Great Recession, in the middle and after the Great Recession, we lost 2,000, mostly GM and Chrysler stores were boomed. But we've been stable at 18,000 for 15 years, absolutely dead flat. If there's any movement at all, it's even a little bit upward. And again, relative to sort of the hypothetical impact of the internet, the idea was that the internet allowed you in the city of Buffalo to look at all the Ford inventory let's pick on somebody else, all the Buick inventory across Buffalo, find the best deal and drive that 50 miles to that dealer because you knew they had the inventory and you knew what the deal was. So eventually the smaller stores would be competed away. Some of that has happened, but not much. People still really, really, really like to buy from the nearest store. And the internet actually has kind of helped this happen in that it's compressed all the price bands. So driving 50 miles probably doesn't get you much of a deal anymore. So it's an interesting battle of the forces that end up in a draw. Ownership consolidation, however, is proceeding. Numbers are, of course, difficult to get here. But from about 9,000 owners in 2010 to about sort of kind of 6,700, there are investment firms here, I think, who have a better handle on this. We have seen a decline in ownership count, roughly 2.3% negative CAGR, and still moving along. I don't know if I can say why it might accelerate. The one reason I think that will not apply is because people say, well, the dealers are getting older and it's time to exit. The dealers have always been getting older. I've got a great article from Texas Monthly in 1995 saying that a lot of dealers are about to exit because they were aging. And that was 30 years ago. It's like the audience at a classical music concert. They're all 70 years old. Nothing, there's anything wrong with that. And, but they've always been 70 years old. So I'm not sure that that's really a factor. Other factors that I hear from dealers, and again, some of you in the buy-sell area would know much better than I do, it's things like the bets are becoming bigger and bigger. The average store in America now is $75 million in revenue. So do I really want to bet that all again on a new technology or a new development or some, EVs or agency or whatever? And it's also some of the old methods for moving the ownership along, like to, the three offspring. It's harder when you've already rolled them out to the 3 offspring, and now they each have 4 offspring, and how do you manage it? Maybe just sell the whole thing. And then one of the big challenges, I remember when Wayne Huizenga, we had cross-continent before, but let's say AutoNation was the first big fish in the pond, the public roll-ups, and I remember the NADA convention, was it 99 or 2000? Everybody was totally convinced that somehow the publics would use their great scale to, steamroller private ownership the way Wayne Huizenga's Blockbuster, which didn't work out in the long run, but in the short run wiped out, Eddie's Video Hut and everything else like that. It's moved glacially. AutoNation was founded in 96, became a public dealer in 98 after spinning off the waste disposal business. But a quarter century later, so after a quarter of a century, which has been a while, the public 6, we don't really know where VT, Berkshire Hathaway Automotive is, represent only 8% of new retail units sold in the United States. This is hardly house on fire, public roll-up of private roll-up. So I guess the question here is, to put it in the question form, is will this change? Will we see a reignition on the public side? Okay, that's it look, I hit 0. Thank you very much. You go to my Substack if you are masochistic and want to hear even more of this. And speaking of masochism, more comments from Charlie Vogelheim. Thank you.